The Dr. Melissa Show and the Stories That Shape Us is sponsored by CNY Mental Health Counseling. Today's guest is my friend, Christen Belcher. Christen's an accomplished growth strategist, operational architect, and founder of Tre Cani. Did I say that right?
Connie, yeah.
Tre Cani. Mm-hmm. All right, perfect. We'll hear a lot more about it. Tre Cani Consulting, a firm dedicated to helping entrepreneurs build growth-ready infrastructure, high-performing teams, and scalable operations. She holds a Bachelor of Science in International Business and a dual major in Political Science from Ithaca College, a foundation that shaped her global thinking and sharp business acumen. And it's Ithaca, so I'm biased. With over 25 years of experience, Christen has led both startups and corporate turnarounds, delivering transformational results by aligning strategic vision with execution. Her operational superpowers lie in simplifying complexity, unlocking growth through customer-centric processes, and architecting systems that enable clarity, accountability, and sustainable scale. Driven by a deep passion for impact, Christen launched her consulting company to bridge the gap many founders face when moving from early success to scalable growth. Her work extends beyond for-profit ventures. She actively serves on nonprofit boards and leads fund development initiatives, applying her business expertise to elevate mission-driven organizations. A sought-after thought partner, Christen brings clarity, energy, and real-world experience to conversations about operational excellence, leadership, and building businesses that last. Whether addressing a room of founders, executive teams, or nonprofit leaders, she's known for making complex topics actionable and inspiring change through practical insight. Welcome, Christen.
Well,
I'm so excited to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here.
So let's just jump in. You know, tell me, go back as far in time as you want to go. But really, what are those core influencing moments in your life, or people or experiences that you think really shaped how you got to be where you're at right now?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me today. I'm so excited to be here, and this is fun for me, so thank you.
Yeah.
I think if I looked back, I don't know that there was one person or one thing or one. I think it's the group of things.
Sure.
And so when I was coming here today, I was thinking about, how do I answer that question? What are the things that influenced me? And I went back to a girlfriend of mine who I lived in Atlanta for a number of years. And when I lived there, one of the ladies that I would walk with, she was just an amazing human. And one of the things, she, at 27 years old, had just gotten married. And she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And so not only did she have to tell her 45-day husband that she was dying because she was stage 4, but they had to discuss whether or not, if she made it, did they ever want to have children? Because if they did, they had to face those challenges prior to the chemo treatments. So long story, they did. And while she was they did all the in vitro work that you have to do prior to receiving cancer treatments. And while she was going through the in vitro and then going into the cancer treatments, she became friends with a little old lady, and the little lady said to her, and this is what stuck with me, and to answer your question, life is a patchwork quilt. And all of the pieces of your quilt are patches, and those are moments in your life, and some are really great, and some are really not, and some kind of blend together, and some just stand out like, what the heck? But you don't understand any of that until you get to either this lady at 88 years old or whatever she was, or heaven, which I personally believe in. But when you get to heaven and you get to look back at your quilt and you realize that this is your life and these are all the things, the beautiful things that came together to form that quilt that makes you who you are. And that just has stuck with me. And so Shelley's story at the end is she lived happily ever after. She beat cancer. She survived. She had triplets. They're amazing. They're 24 years old now. So,
my gosh.
Phenomenal story. But, I take with me Shelley's quilt story everywhere. And so to your question of the things that have melded me, right? I grew up in the all-American family, 1 boy, 1 girl, 2.5 kids, i.e. the dog, the white picket fence, so those things are great and they're a great foundation. It's, I think, what set the stage for me to be able to go out and learn all the hard lessons and lose some, win some of those. And I don't know that lose is the right answer. I don't think you lose anything, but you have to take from that situation. So moments like being able to work with companies, work with entrepreneurs who are struggling and getting them over the hump, and then work with some, I worked in corporate, I've been in corporate America, and that was really fun and really eye-opening. I learned that I like a little more altruistic view on business, right? That's why I like the entrepreneurial side of things, is to be with people who have a truly vested interest. And there's a very big difference in corporate America personal investment and then entrepreneurial personal investment.
Totally.
And for me, that was this, some of the changing over of the guard on the personal and professional side was to really be in that more important passion than just running numbers every day. So
what led you into business to begin with?
I don't know, quite honestly. International business was my major at Ithaca, and the reason that I picked that was because two things. One, I loved international studies at the time, and don't ask me to do it now because I would fail. I was fluent in French, and so I could speak different languages, and I wanted to learn other languages, and then I wanted to go to law school and really look at international business law and international even kind of people law kind of things, and I wasn't sure. And then I graduated from Ithaca, and I had gotten accepted to Georgetown, and I looked at the tuition bill for Georgetown.
So law school at Georgetown?
Yes.
Ooh, Kristen, I'm like, this woman's brilliant. Yes.
I don't know about that. But I looked at the tuition bill, and I had gotten a job offer. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think I'm going to wait list, right? So I waited a year. I pushed Georgetown off for a year, and I went to Atlanta, and I started my big girl jobs. And it was fun and exciting. And I got introduced. I went right to work for EDS, Electronic Data Systems, which is Ross Perot's old company. I'm dating myself. But they had just bought the Bell South Data Center in Hoover, Alabama. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with my international degree now that I wasn't going to law school. But it worked. It was a business degree. And they hired me as a business analyst for Electronic Data Systems. And we designed a software system that managed the whole of the Bell South Data Center in Hoover, Alabama. And that is kind of cool. And anyone who knows that kind of stuff is like, that's pretty cool. But what was really interesting is the building itself was 7 floors on the south side and 7 floors on the north side. They connected in the middle. And each of the floors was a mile around. So there was 7 miles of interior space on each side. So 14 total miles. So walking at lunch was great.
That's huge.
It was enormous. I'd never seen a bigger building, I don't think. And then right in the center, in the basement, they powered it by these huge jet engines.
Wow.
Diesel jet engines. It was just really neat. But my point in that is it was such a wide open, I was exposed to all different channels and all different verticals within EDS. And I really enjoyed it. I think my ability to ask the ever impervious question, why, has really served me well in my life. Certainly there, because I was like, well, why would we do that? Why would we do that? And I have clearly no ego in that. I don't care if I look silly because it's just curious to me.
How were you received when you would ask that? Because one of my experiences is that not just in, like, as a therapist, that's a given, right?
Sure.
And even if I'm not directly asking why, I think it's known, you come to therapy to try to figure something out or try to explore something or resolve something. But I think in business, it's been interesting because I've been met with a different kind of response. And a lot of it is like it's taken me back a little bit, where sometimes people are like, they aren't used to necessarily holding themselves accountable for being able to explain why they do the things that they do. It's almost like tradition, or because we've done it this way forever, why would you even ask? Or I'm afraid I'm being rude.
Right.
Right? That I'm like, I guess we don't ask that here. And I can't not. I mean, that's just sort of who I am. And I've learned to embrace that, as it sounds like you have too. But I'm curious, those earlier days when you're coming out of college, you're trying to make your mark, you don't necessarily have the confidence or even the trust. Mm-hmm. How did you push yourself still to ask and to be curious?
I think ignorance is bliss. I actually, one of my God-given talents is reading a room. I can read people really, really well. And I think I learned that early on, even like pre-professional.
Yeah.
I learned how to read a room, and I learned if people were open to my questions or not. And so I think, though I always ask why, and 99% of the time I'm confident enough to just be okay if somebody thinks I'm silly. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Yes, I'm silly. Could you answer my question, please? But
I think still it's on the table.
It's right there, right? And I think that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just who I am, because I'm genuinely curious. And I think that's the piece that comes through.
Yes.
Is that I'm genuinely curious. I'm not
without judgment.
Yeah. I'm not trying to judge you. I'm not trying to make you look silly. I truly don't know the answer, or I wouldn't ask. Mm-hmm. Right. And I know they'll say a lot of times that, yes, you want to be an attorney, and attorneys never ask a question they don't know the answer to. But that's not true with me. Right. I didn't go to law school.
And you're not interrogating anyone.
No, I'm trying to better understand, because from the early on point at EDS as a business analyst, my job was to understand what everything was why were we trying to do all of this? And so because we've always done it, doesn't work because you can't, that's silly. And I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of working with someone who's building a software package or a website even, right? And they don't necessarily ask the question why. They just do because that's how their brains work. If you want a blue screen, I'm going to give you a blue screen. Well, why do you want a blue screen? Well, because it's pretty. Great, but you already have pink text or blue text, right? And the blue text on the blue screen isn't going to work. Or if you put pink on the blue screen, it's going to not look so professional. It might look a little more cartoony. So why do we want to do this? So I think it goes back to genuine interest, genuine curiosity, and genuinely trying to make it better.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm sure it's annoying sometimes.
But it also sounds like, to go back to your point, you knew how to read the room, which I imagine built the trust and respect from your colleagues where they would let you, maybe even invite you to ask those questions.
I think so. I hope so. I hope there's a mutual respect. That is definitely something that's very important to me is humans are humans are humans. And some of us do something one way and some of us do it a different way, but that's okay. That's what makes the world go round. And I think that, again, genuine, earnest, why are we doing this? It definitely helped. And yes, I always have respect for a position. I may not respect the person in the position, to be very clear, but I respect the position enough to give that position its due respect. So if a senior vice president walked in a room, I wasn't going to walk up and talk about, our last girls' trip, right? You have to, again, judge the room and give due respect to the people who have earned that respect. And so I think, the question I would ask to a senior vice president of corporate was probably different than the question I would ask of the guy we're trying to build the software package with. And not because they're different, but because their roles are different, right? The reason for being is different. So I think knowing that too, I relied on my emotional intelligence to go back and say, who is this person? And am I phrasing my question in such a way that's respectful to them, but also kind of meets my genuine curiosity and the need in that question.
Interesting. So like you would, and I imagine you've got to have some knowledge of the system, right? Yes. So like maybe you're working there, or when you come in and you consult with a company, you maybe give it some time.
Yes.
Right.
Learn.
But you position that person in their role in almost like a hierarchy.
If it's required. Right. And again, I've been in business 25 years. Yeah. So that hierarchy has changed. I think the corporate structure is not as prevalent as it used to be. It still exists. But given you have to address the person and what their need is in order to resolve your need. And I don't think people understand that enough, right? It's not just about you. That's the piece I think I've always understood is it's not just about me. Not that I've always done it right. I've learned a lot in 25 years, but I think if you can always position yourself for a win-win, not a win-loss of any kind, I think that's kind of where you start to really make real relationships and deep-seated trust or respect. Again, you don't have to like everybody you work with. You don't have to like everyone in the room, but you absolutely have to respect them and gain a mutual respect so you can get done what you need to get done.
Yeah. Can you talk about, or maybe you can even give an example, obviously I know you wouldn't share too much detail, but of a time when maybe you bumped up into that, where you said, you don't necessarily respect the person, but you respect the role that they're in. And how do you navigate that?
So I have worked for multiple entrepreneurs, and one entrepreneur in particular, I did not respect as the head of the company. What we valued in life was very, very different. I valued the people and the process, and they valued the outcome, what those people and process produced for them. And that for me is a very hard place to be. And so I think at first I tried to just let it be. You do you, and you function your way, and you let them function the way that they need to function. As it got to a point where I couldn't just let it be, I would have conversations with them and just very openly say to them, this is what's happening.
What would you see?
I would watch people fade into non-productive people, right? There were a lot of people in the company who were highly productive when given the right circumstances. So finding their strengths, giving them positions and work and tasks and projects and leading things if they wanted to that they were good at. And I'm not saying make it happy fun time, right? It's still work. There's things we have to get done. But if I can focus on a team or a person's strength and help them move in that direction, we'll work on the things that are weaker as we go. And or we'll bring in a teammate that can help support that person in a different way. And so I would watch this owner, entrepreneur come into a room literally, and it just dissolved people into kind of blend them into the wall. They went from this vibrant, really productive person to literally like a wallflower. And I didn't understand that. And as I watched, it was just the delivery. And again, there was a lack of genuine care for what that person or process was accomplishing. And it was strictly about the outcome. Understood, we need to make money or we need to drive the company forward, but there's a time and a place for those kind of conversations. In everyday work operations, that's not where it belongs. So I would have those conversations and I would point out, did you see so-and-so's reaction to your comment? No. Okay, well, watch next time, right? And I would point those things out and I would do my level best to be respectful of A, it's his company, B, it's the way it's been, and it's the way they operate. But if we're going to grow, if we're going to do things bigger, better, more efficient, we have to do it different, right? Wasn't it Einstein's theory of relativity, right? If you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different outcomes, it's insanity, not relativity.
Yes, yeah, definition of insanity.
Right. So those were the things I would bring up, and I used to joke. And we got to a place, I think, where I would say to them, stop driving your motorboat into my sailboat cove, right? Because every time you drive that motorboat into that cove, I then spend days, weeks, months bailing all the water out of the sailboats, righting the sailboats, getting them cleaned up and ready to go. And then we can look to go out where before you drove your motorboat in there, we were ready to roll. So it wasn't easy. It was very, very difficult, very, very taxing. And I spent more time managing that than the company. And that got very draining.
Well, and what's so interesting, and that's what I see as the big gap in leadership development, and that's what I'm trying to spin off, is this idea of, it sounds like your role is to give the feedback, to say, hey, when you do this thing that is really maladaptive, it creates this impact. Whether or not you intend it, this is the impact that it has, and now I am spending all of my time managing it.
Correct.
What I've found, I think, in working with people in therapy is that the awareness of it in and of itself is not effective in terms of change. And that most of the time when we know that we're doing something wrong, we can't just do it differently. Right. As much as we may want to. So, I mean, part of what I'm trying to make a big difference in is getting to those root causes of why people are doing those maladaptive things that impact the people that they're leading. So then you don't have to do as much management of it.
Correct. But I think that's true, not just for senior level leaders, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's everybody day to day needs to understand the impact you have on people. And one of the things that I do a lot with companies that I'm consulting with and not-for-profits that I'm consulting with is this producer-consumer relationship. What do you produce? What do I consume? And are they of equal value, right? Are you producing what I need to consume? And I don't mean that it's your responsibility. It's just in a day-to-day, there are things that have to be done. And if you're doing them and they impact me getting my stuff done, do we understand that? And if we don't understand that, and this is where I get into my operational architecture, right? And looking at
do it. I love hearing it. Yeah, do it.
This is why, these things have to exist because you don't understand that relationship. But if you don't, and you're completely oblivious, well, you're not trying to hurt my feelings and you're not trying to sabotage my job. You just don't know what I need. So if I tell you what I need, or we work together to define, well, I can't produce everything you need to consume. Well, why not? We look at that. Then, we can start to build a better operating system for that company. And that's where someone with your skill set then kind of comes in and says, okay, now we've got the operational piece running. Are you ready to take on those personal interactions? And do you understand why you're treating this person that way, or, whatever the case may be? So I think that's a really great melding point of where people's egos and conscious and subconscious thoughts or unconscious thoughts and their operating structures have to really cross those meld those lines together. And it's interesting when they work, it's phenomenal.
Right, because the pieces, right. Everyone knows the right of way on the water,
1,000,000%.
and you're creating space for each other to really do what you need to do.
1,000,000%.
Yeah,
Certainly.
So that is really incredible. Now, is that something? So you said when you were working in Alabama, you had the opportunity to be a business strategist,
Yes,
right, and create this whole software platform. So, at what point did you shift into operations?
So I think it would have been probably not until, well, I guess CP Ships, which was in Tampa. So I moved from Atlanta to Tampa. At CP Ships, I got into that. It was still on the technology side, but it was the tech ops side. And so we were building and developing these things, these applications at the time. It was the first online, it wasn't really an app that we all think of apps now, but it was back in the day in early 2000s. And so in that was where we really got into the operational side of making sure that there was process and procedure before we designed the software. So we designed the software, but it was in support of the operational procedures. And I think that was one of the first places where I realized that technology doesn't replace people. It just makes what people do better, easier, faster, cheaper kind of thing. So this was a logistics platform that tracked your we would put, so one of our customers was BMW. And so BMW would make the car and they'd put it in a container, and in the container on a truck. The truck would go to the port, sail across the Atlantic Ocean, come off the port in South Carolina, get off, be put on a truck and taken to the dealerships. And so you could watch all of that online. And so, but you had to understand the operational procedure that was manual people based in order to build a system that actually worked the right way. And so it was that, I think that was the point where I realized that's really neat. But operations, so some of the problems that we ran into with that application was we didn't dig deep enough into the day-to-day operating procedures that the people were doing to realize that some of those were kind of messed up. So we had to go back and clean those up before we could really make the software do what it needed to do, or the online app do what it needed to do. And so that's kind of where that moment of, hey, that's kind of neat, kind of triggered for me, was like, oh, let's really dig into this operating side before we then implement technology. Because if we implement technology on a not clean operating system, that technology is not going to help us. It's going to actually hurt us, because now we're even that much further away from the manual procedures that we need to do well. So it was interesting, but I think that would be, it was probably CP Ships back in the day.
It's so cool, too, because it sounds like that's the moment where you have that intersection between your draw to reading people and almost like this psychological foundation, right?
Yeah.
With like how then they are producing and how that also impacts and is influenced by the technology that you're creating to make it more efficient. But maybe the foundation, like you started out by saying your family's your foundation. Right. And it comes back to those people still being the foundation of business.
Absolutely. And no matter, I've had multiple conversations, as I'm sure most people have at this point in the world. AI is going to replace all humans. No, it's not. It's just going to do what you do better. So use it for what it can do for you. Make it help you be better, do better, faster, again, more efficient. And I think that's been true for technology, and certainly in the last probably 25 to 50 years even, right? Technology has just changed everything. And it keeps changing leaps and bounds. And, it's interesting to see. But the fundamental piece behind all of that technology is still people.
100%. And I think the more that I use AI, and I integrate it pretty much daily at this point,
me too.
I would say not pretty much daily, for sure daily. It has so much to do with the inputs that you're giving it. Like the kids now, my kids in school, they're forbidden from using AI, which doesn't make sense to me, given that it is so accessible and it is such a tool. It almost seems like teach them how to use it effectively, teach them how to use it responsibly and ethically, and to enhance, as opposed to just forbid them.
No, exactly. But I think that's, I don't know if it's still around, because I haven't been in the throes of a development cycle in a long time, but the running theory was, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
So if you give me garbage requirements, or you give me garbage operating systems to then turn into technology, I can't. It's not possible. It'll happen. Something will come out at the other side, but whether it's good, bad, or ugly, right? And there's all different theories on how to do software development, the waterfall and Agile and Six Sigma and, whatever, all the different things. And what they really come down to at the end of the day is how do you most clearly define where you are, manually, human, even with technology, and then alter that state, that outcome with a good, solid technology base that supports what the human factor needed. And it's interesting. It's still really interesting. It's just very different now. And there's 1,000 different apps and softwares and things that can help you do what you do in a really unique way. And I agree. I think AI should not be forbidden from kids, right? I think they need to know what it does and how it works and how they can use it and when not to use it even, right? And those are just rules and fundamentals that I think are true for anybody.
Right. It's even like ethics.
Exactly.
Right?
100%.
So now, as you've gone through your career and you've had this success in the corporate world, and now you're creating your own consultation business.
Yes.
Right. And I think you've been doing that for a while.
Correct.
Anyway.
Yes.
Right?
It's been a kind of a side project. I've worked for companies for a while, whether entrepreneurial or corporate kind of companies, but I've always had my consulting business on the side. And now I think I'm just going to spend a little more time on that, a little more focus on that. But it's been fun.
What lights you up about that? Like being able to go into a company.
I love learning. I think I'm going to tell you that I'm a little too old to be a Gen Y or a millennial, but I love learning, and they're consummate students, right? They really are. And I'm not in the generation but I should have been, because I love to learn. And so when I go into a company, I love to learn. And again, my favorite question being why? Well, why do you do that? And again, it's not judgmental. It's just I want to understand, why would we do that? And so there's all those shows on like Discovery and A&E, like behind the scenes and how it's done. And, those my favorite shows on the planet. And I'm a dork if that makes me a dork, but I'm a dork. But I love to do the same thing in a company. Why are you doing that? How does that work? Why do you do that kind of thing? And what is the outcome of the thing that you're doing? And, that is really interesting to me. And so it's going into these companies in all different verticals, in all different channels, and understanding what they do and why they do it. And then how can I help make it better? And not for my glory and not for my name in lights, but just because it's interesting to me to see things change and shift and move in a different direction. Growth is really neat for people. It can be very dangerous. What I've learned from a lot of different people is that it can be very dangerous if not done strategically.
What does that mean? What can be dangerous?
If you grow out of control.
Like grow too much too fast?
Too much too fast, or too much too fast without structure.
Okay.
So a lot of companies that I've seen that have grown really, really quickly that don't do as well, grew really, really quickly without taking a pause to figure out how to put an infrastructure in place, right? So you don't just build a 4-story house. You really have to have a really solid basement. And then you go to the first floor and then you make sure that's stable, and then the second floor. But if you go from basement to fourth and hope 1, 2, and 3 are good, they aren't, right? If you hire too many people and you don't take the time to make sure that the people fit your culture, if you don't take the time to teach people what their job is, what's your expectation of them? If I walked in here today and started singing, you'd be like, why are you doing that? The expectation is we have a conversation, right? Well, that's not fair. You didn't tell me you didn't want me to sing, right? But I see that all the time. Well, we're going to hire these 65 people because we need bodies to do stuff. And all of a sudden, 35 of the 65 don't like each other because they're all doing some mixture of the same thing. That's unfair, right? And then causes a huge infrastructure problem, causes your operating systems to not work as well. And all of a sudden, the 65-person growth turns into a 70-person layoff. Because
that's a pain point.
It's horrible.
Right? For a company or for an entrepreneur, it's that desire to grow, to most likely make as much money or have as much impact as possible, but without the infrastructure in place or even clarity on who, what, why.
Correct.
All of the procedures are.
Correct. And, I live by one of my grandmother's favorite sayings, we plan and God laughs, right? So I still believe that. That's true in business too, is you can plan, but you also have to be ready to pivot. Right?
Yes.
Because there's going to be different things. You're not going to see certain things that show up, and you're not going to anticipate the way that certain things go. But having a fundamental guardrail system has to be in place. So we may not know exactly, whether you're going to get $1 million customer next or a $10 million customer next. We may not be able to know that, but how to embrace $1 million up to a $10 million customer, you have to have those guardrails in place. What do we have to do to make that next leap of faith? And that has to be strategic. It has to be thought out, and it has to be, again, guardrails, not hard, fast rules.
Do you feel like with the different business owners that you've worked with, do you think that they know how to make decisions from a place of strategy and like really intentional growth decisions versus more instinctual, feelings-oriented decisions?
I think entrepreneurs are good at being entrepreneurs because they can make instinctual gut checks. I have not found that entrepreneurs are as good at the strategic perspective. So 99%, how about that? So as to leave a margin of error, 99% of the entrepreneurs that I worked with have a vision for, this is what I want it to look like. How to get there is nearly impossible for them. They need people, not just me, there are other people in the world who do what I do, but that can see, okay, in order to get here, right, you're a project manager at heart. In order to get here, what are the 15 steps that you have to take first? And you have to back into that and start with the very, very small. And that's not what they do because their brains don't work like that. They just see the future. They want to be in the future. They want to live in the future. It's cool. And I think all of the entrepreneurs I've ever worked with are really funny about shiny new objects. Oh my God, the shiny new object. And you're like, hold that thought, come back over here.
Yes.
And you have to literally grab them because they're so excited. And what they want is not wrong. It's just, we can't get there. Because if we go from here to there, there's a giant Grand Canyon gaping hole in what we're going to do. And not everybody's going to make that jump.
Right.
So come back and we'll get there. And I can show you how we can get there. But let's come back and figure it out together and with the team and get the teams involved.
Yes.
But yeah, they possess skills, entrepreneurs possess skills that I don't, right? Which is seeing things that don't exist. I can tell you how to get there, right? If you make it up, I'll make it happen, right? And so like Tre Cani's, our slogan is helping to cultivate what you've created. And so I can't create what doesn't exist, but I can make it better. I can cultivate it. And I think that's a very different skill set. So not good, not bad, just very different. So no, I don't think most entrepreneurs strategically focus on the future. Some do. There's no such thing as all and none, right?
Well, but it's also, I can identify with that. And I was actually laughing because literally I came here from my own therapy session where we talked about, the theme of it was me trying to not be distracted by all of the shiny objects. And it is something that I've had for my entire life, which is why now I have embraced the idea of being an entrepreneur and being a creator. Sure. And even talking to my therapist about the idea of it's not a bad thing that I am trying to resist or restrict, but I have to recognize that I have to limit myself from all of the shiny objects to be able to focus or prioritize on the ones that I really want to cultivate. Sure. And the idea too of delegating or hiring on somebody like you, because I do see, the sky is the limit in certain opportunities, sure, but I need someone to hold my feet on the ground to say, hey, make sure that you're paying attention to your hiring or making sure that you're paying attention to your branding or your operational systems, or this person in this business can't just float over and do this job here. Right. It's a different company. And I definitely fell prey to that. When you're talking about the entrepreneur who, like many of us are great, especially I would say in the healthcare field or something similar to what I do, where you've got this craft that you've honed in on, and now you're creating a bigger business where I'm going from solo now to multiple employees, right, and growing fast. And I realized, I think we were at about 8 employees when I realized, oh my gosh, it's almost as if I created a village and we don't have roads. Right. And I was getting burnt out as the owner because they were asking me so many questions. It's a lot. And it was exhausting. And I would get irritable because I was tired and there wasn't a differentiation of the different roles within the company. We didn't have guidelines. We didn't have it all very explicit.
Right.
So, and systems. So I spent a full year and systematized our entire practice, every single thing, every little tiny minuscule thing from, the temperature that the office should be in the summer versus the winter to, what do we say when someone asks us about writing a letter for an emotional support animal to how do we effectively do a crisis intervention and send someone to the hospital? It is all in this huge, massive playbook,
right,
which becomes, our guide.
Sure.
But it has been so incredibly important. And I can't imagine operating or growing or scaling without it.
You couldn't. Not successfully.
That's right.
No.
That's right.
And how exhausting for you. Because that's not your skill set, right? I'm sure that must have been exhausting for you.
It literally took a full year. And
sure.
it's still, it's a live document. So, I think that helps. Yes, it has to be. Right?
Yeah, that's the pivot. Back a couple minutes ago. That's your pivot, right? I'm sure nothing in that book is so hard and fast that it can't pivot.
Right. Right.
But at least you're aware that even if it is, now you can go back and pivot if you have to.
It is, and it changes with the whatever is going on or whatever other service we're trying to offer. But what I love is that when we have onboarding and we have a new employee, it is so easy at this point to hand this over. And I'm really, really proud of it because it is, it's like this, book that documents all of the incredible things that our team does. Right. But it's also so impactful, I would say, on the day-to-day. And I can also say that my coaching clients who are entrepreneurs that don't have that is one of the main things that we talk about. And that, I think, is where you come in because it is not something, maybe they don't have the full year that I was able to dedicate to doing this and to really, writing everything out. And it was certainly not by myself, but maybe they don't have a team that can help them do that either.
They need either a team, they need a sounding board, they need a conversation, right? And it just, all things start with a conversation. All fun things start with a conversation, right? And I think that is key that you figured that out. It's amazing because not all do. And most will be like, I'm not wasting time. Well, you have to slow down to speed up.
Right.
You have to. And
it's such a counterintuitive thing.
Especially for entrepreneurs who
we're
see
full speed
the
ahead.
Future fast forward.
You know what else, Christen? I almost feel like entrepreneurs don't necessarily see a clear vision of the future. I think we see more shiny objects ahead, but we don't really see them in clarity. We have faith that we'll get there, or we know what it'll feel like, or we're looking for a feeling. Right. But I don't know that I know many entrepreneurs who have that final destination.
Probably not. Right. And that's okay because and I say you all because I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm more of an intrapreneur. And I use that word a few times now. People are like, what?
I've never heard that.
I'm an intrapreneur. I don't have the new idea. I'm not going to figure out I'm not Steve Jobs. I'm not Steve Wozniak. I'm not Melissa Carmen who can take something and make something out of nothing. I just make it better. I can make it more efficient. But as the daughter of an entrepreneur, I think genetically I'm predispositioned to that entrepreneurial side of the world. So I'm going to look at every business venture I take on as if it were my own and function as if it were my own or an entrepreneurial basis because I want to see it succeed and I want to see it grow and I want to see it be more than it is. But I'm not going to take the risk on my own because I'm just not built to make that something out of nothing. I will make something out of something and probably make it bigger, better, faster, but I'm not going to come up with the something. I need someone else with that skill set to come up with the something. And so I think entrepreneurial skills are amazing. And no, I don't know necessarily that, again, majority of entrepreneurs see that strategic end game because they're so busy in the, what about this and what about this and what about this? And, one of the conversations I've had recently was around lever pulling. And entrepreneurs are like, whatever, pull them all and see what happens. And then people like me are more like, no, we're not going to pull them all. We're going to pull one or two and see what kind of a reaction we get. And then we know whether to put that lever back or leave it pulled. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just a phenomenal compliment to how people are and who they are and what they are, right? And so that's why I love intrapreneurial side of things because I'm going to think like an entrepreneur or function like an entrepreneur. And I love that side of the world, but I'm just not built to create something out of nothing.
But it also sounds like you have this insider knowledge growing up in this environment.
Yes.
Do you have memories of that? Like listening to your dad talk about the entrepreneurial journey and
Absolutely.
What do you remember about that?
Oh, everything from, so again, my foundation was, we were a big, my brother played sports, I played sports, we were in all kinds of stuff, but we always had dinner together, probably 6 nights a week. My parents were, nope.
Yeah,
Great.
priorities.
Fine, it's 9:00, we're having dinner.
Yep.
And back then we didn't have cell phones, or if we did, they were the big bag phones that sat in the car, so you never had to worry about that stuff. But, there was no distractions. It was just us, and we sat down and we had dinner. And, and my dad wouldn't talk necessarily about business, but he would share about his day and the things that they were doing. And, we always had a running joke in our family that on Monday we'd have surf and turf, and by Friday we were eating PB&J because something had changed. And so we knew that. And so fundamentally we understood what was important and what wasn't. And that fundamental importance was us being together and learning and understanding and having a deep-seated value on each other and that family and the things that mattered, as opposed to what car we were driving or what house we lived in or the clothes on our back, right?
Or what you were having for dinner.
Correct. That we were having dinner was important, not what we were having for dinner.
Right.
So I think that was an interesting perspective on being the daughter of an entrepreneur. And my dad had worked in corporate America and was very successful in corporate America, and then decided that if he was going to work that hard, he was going to do it for himself. And so, I think that's an interesting perspective as well, as to kind of weave that path of what's best for you, the person, and the people around you.
Interesting.
It was really neat.
Well, the other thing that you mentioned too is that you don't feel like you have it in you to take that risk.
Correct.
So is that also what you saw? Did you get that from these interactions with your dad?
I think so. I think it was, I believed, right? Or at least at some point in my brain, I engaged in corporate America is the way to go, right? Because it didn't appear, and I wasn't in the middle of a family dinner that had those, but you got the GE watch back in the day. You'd work 40 years at GE and they hand you a watch and say, thank you very much, or, Lockheed or any of those guys. And that felt like it had more security to it. So I think that's kind of why I went the corporate route, is I believe there was more security in it. As I've aged, as I've been in business, and as the world has changed, it's different, right? I think it's very different. And so now you don't have to have a cool idea to be an entrepreneur. You have to have insights into a missing piece. And adding that missing piece to something that may already exist is where I think I've now learned that maybe I can be an entrepreneur. Versus
I think you are, whether or not you want to be. You are an entrepreneur.
I'm still in denial, I think, but I think it's those things that are very interesting. And I think, again, we plan and God laughs, right? So I'm not going to be an entrepreneur because it's scary and there's so much insecurity to it, and corporate's better and I'll get my watch in 40 years. And that's not true either, right? So my plan has pivoted, and my guardrails are still in place. I know what to look for and what I will and won't in my operating procedures for me. But I think I'm practicing what I preach, which is plan, but have a pivot, within the guardrails of what you want to see at the end of that journey.
Right. It sounds like intentionality without rigidity.
Absolutely.
So now you're open to whatever process you experience.
Right.
But you also recognize that there are these fundamental factors that have to be at play, both for you and for the job that you're doing, in order for you to be willing to do it. And it's almost like you've paid your dues.
Yes, 1,000,000%. I paid my dues and probably will pay a few more, right?
Of course.
But that's okay, because it allows me to add more to the operating procedures and the manuals and the things that I work through. But it's fun. It's learning. And, one of the things my dad always said, and still to this day says, there's no such thing as failure, which maybe there is or maybe there isn't, but there's lessons learned. So there's always something you can take from a quote unquote failure. And if you take something from it, then it's not a failure. It's just something that you learn, and you put that in the back of your filing cabinet and you move forward. And sometime if that ever shows up again, well, now you know how to deal with it, how you're not going to deal with it, or how you're going to engage with it or not engage with it. So I think that's a lot of it too, is what did I learn and how do I move that forward, and how do I make a better decision should that ever present itself again, whatever it was
I love
in that
that.
moment.
What do you feel like, what stands out to you about your own life and thinking about this patchwork quilt of maybe an experience that felt like a failure in the moment that you later realized was a learning opportunity?
That's a great question. Probably I've had a few of them, I'm sure. I think probably one of my favorite career patches was with Envisage Information Systems, and we built a company from 26 people to well into the 300s and 3 million top line to well into the 70 million top line. Fun, amazing, crazy. And I think one of the lessons learned in that was what we talked about a little bit earlier, where I don't have to necessarily like or want to engage with a certain person, but I have to respect a position or what someone brings to a table. And so though I don't necessarily care for someone's personality or delivery or whatever, it's you have to find a way to work with them, because at the end of the day, you are better off for it. And so we had a ton of personalities, and because we grew fast and we hadn't really planned for it. And so we made it through, but we made a lot of bad hires in the process, and we had to really take a step back at one point and look at the culture and say, is this the culture we want? And if it isn't, then what are we going to do? And we didn't. It wasn't the culture that we wanted. So we slowed down and we went back and we put in place the things that we needed to build the culture that we wanted. And we learned how to adjust our expectations of each other and what we really needed at the end of a day. And so there was the senior leadership team. There was the, kind of the mid-tier leadership team. We weren't a huge corporate structure. Even at 300, we were pretty flat, but there were leaders in those leadership teams, and we had a lot of dynamic and a lot of experience and a lot of strong personalities. And at one point, I remember saying to someone on the leadership team, I said, I don't have to like you. We don't have to go out drinking together. If we never have a drink together, we never have dinner together, that's okay. But what we have to figure out is how to work together on a day-to-day basis. And in that statement, I was also looking inward, right? What was I doing to cause the situation to be so tenacious and so not functional? And so it was a matter of me kind of checking my ego and being like, you know what? There is value to what is being presented to you, and there is value in what you're presenting. So figure out how to do that a little less crazy, a little less intense, a little less ego-based, and a lot more genuine, right? And again, to genuine curiosity as opposed to judgmental. Why am I asking the question? Am I trying to set you up to look silly? Or am I genuinely asking a question that matters? And I found that I wasn't genuinely asking a question to move things forward. I was trying to ask questions to show how silly I thought his behavior was. So it was very shame on me. But at the same time, I learned a lot from that situation and saying, okay, there is a lot here. There's a lot to offer, and you have a lot to offer. And together you can actually make this thing go better, farther, faster. And we did. Don't know that we do or don't like each other, but we definitely learned how to work together, and we did a great job together.
Yeah, you were also open to your own self-awareness process, and that's so hard to teach people to do on a regular basis, right? Where those feelings that come up for you, whether it be irritability or agitation or resentment, right. It's like, that you are acting or feeling in a way that is not your norm.
Correct.
Or how you like to be with other people, or even how you normally are with other people. And it sounds like you were able to use that as an indicator to go deeper in of all right, I want this person to hold themselves accountable to how they're showing up in our conversations. Oh, shoot, that also means that I need to do the same thing. Yeah. And it's such a common sense thing, but people do not do it. There's so much of the externalization of what is going on. What are you doing to make me feel this way? Right. As opposed to how am I also playing a part in this dance that we have right now? And I recognize that I can't control you, but I can change how I'm showing up. Hopefully you'll do the same.
Correct. And I think that I don't think we realized it. I think you just articulated it very, very clearly. And I don't think the dance was that choreographed, but we did get through it and we did better things because of it. So it is interesting. And I think I see that even the day to day now is where people are like, well, you made me feel this way. No, I didn't make you anything, right? You made you feel this way. Something I did triggered that or point, but how do we collectively fix whatever that situation is, right? And I think that is hugely introspective. And I don't think a lot of people either want to, maybe, or know how to look internally and just kind of say, look, this is what I'm bringing. And sometimes, maybe you're not doing anything. Maybe that person that you're dealing with is just having a really crappy time. But at the same time, maybe you should just be a little more open to they're in a really bad spot.
Right.
Leave them alone for 2 days. Don't bother them for 2 days.
See what happens.
Yeah. Bring them a cup of coffee one day just because. Right? Because maybe what they're going through, you being kind, just triggers a different situation. So, I think, again, it goes back to something we said very early. Humans are humans are humans. And we don't do it all the same way and we don't function the same way. Thank God. Because the world would be really boring.
Without a doubt. And it's also depersonalizing everything. So if the person that you're working with, say you have a colleague who's in a bad mood for a day or is acting in a way that it's rude, whatever it is, they're snarky, passive aggressive, angry, whatever it is. But it's like depersonalizing it. It is likely not about you.
No. 99% of the time probably has nothing to do with you.
Right.
It's certainly in a work situation. Unless you do take a look inside and go, I probably shouldn't have said that thing, or probably shouldn't have told their manager that thing, or criticized something that they were doing. It's just
right
introspection and understanding how you interact with the people around you.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So what about, so that's something that you learned. What about your greatest successes, the things that you're most proud of?
Oh, goodness. I'm very proud of the people that I've had the pleasure of working with. And some, only recently have I kind of learned the impact I've had on people over the course of my career. And I didn't realize it, but there's some people that I just believed in when they didn't believe in themselves. And it's recently come back around and they've said, you believed in me in a time when no one believed in me. And there's a couple people whose careers, had I made a different decision on hiring, their careers would be very different. And I don't want to take credit for their success because they did it. I didn't. But that one moment I believed in them altered the patches that they earned in that quilt. So I think that's really neat. I've been part of some really cool teams. And I think where I feel successful in those building of those teams is that there were very specific rules of engagement that I did set. And those rules of engagement are what allowed those teams to then build themselves, but in a successful direction. And so being part of those people, being part of those teams, one of the most fun times I've ever had with successful people or realizing that I kind of was in a cool spot is back when I was with Envisage and it was financial services. And because of what we were doing, I had to sit on a couple of regulatory boards and bodies and stuff. And one of the boards that I sat on, we had a dinner after board meetings. And I was sitting at the table and my mother's least favorite job that I ever did was I was a bartender. And I loved it. I thought it was great. I absolutely love bartending. You meet all kinds of people. You do all kinds of fun stuff. And you get to learn how to multitask and you learn how to deal with all these different personalities. I thought it was great. My mom hated it, but that's okay. I was sitting at a table at this financial regulatory board meeting. It was a dinner. And I was sitting at the table with names that, whether you're in financial services or not, you would recognize. And so I remember just looking around going, these people are amazing. And I can't believe I'm sitting at a table with these people. And I'm like, we were talking about something and one of the gentlemen at the table said, all right, let's be people. And I'm like, okay, we've been the executives all day. We've been the workers all day.
Take that hat
let's
off.
Just be people. Let's talk about our favorite job ever. And so I'm like, bartending. And I don't know if it's just because I actually enjoyed it or because my mother told me not to do it and I did it, but whatever, for whatever reason, I did enjoy it. And so I was the junior most person at the table, not by age or profession, but because I was the newest at the table for that board. And so he's like, you have to go first. And so I was like, all right, fine. My favorite job ever was a bartender. And they said, why? And I said, well, because I learned about people and I learned about all these different things. And I said, my favorite part is if you were a jerk, I just didn't serve you. You can't do that in day to day, right? In corporate America kind of stuff. And every single one, there were 10 of us at the table, and 8 of the 10 of us had all been bartenders at some point in our life. And 8 of the 10, favorite job was bartending. And so I think I only bring that story up because it was fun and it's enjoyable. And what it did is it made these really big names, these very powerful people, human. And so that was a huge success for me as a woman. Again, I was 2 of 10 at the table in this very powerful room with these very powerful people. But you know what? At the end of the day, we're still humans. Mm-hmm. And our favorite job was bartending. So let's get down to being real. Let's be humans. And I just think it was a really neat moment for me to say, success is what you make it, so long as you treat people right along the way. And it just, all of that kind of came together at that one dinner. And I remember leaving there thinking, oh my God, they're just humans. They're just humans.
And I have a seat at this table. I am just like them.
Almost. I don't know in that moment that I had any or even would admit to thinking that I was just like them.
Yeah.
But that's my own personal, way too much introspection sometimes, maybe.
Well, what does that mean? Is that like an insecurity?
Yes.
Like not feeling
yes.
like you deserve the seat at the table?
Not being able to say out loud, I was at that table and I was their equal. Is it a fluke moment in time that I was at that table? No, but there's part of me that's like, yeah, I don't know that I measure up to the success that those people have gone on to have or had at the time that we were at that table. So am I the same? I don't know. But it was in that moment, it was a huge success for being at that table and talking to these people and having a human conversation with some of the most influential people of our time financially in the financial world. So it was cool. It's exciting. And it was very perspective setting for me to understand that, their favorite job was bartenders. They were pouring drinks and flinging beer bottles and beer caps and sloshing through the crowd.
Right. And it's so connecting.
Yeah.
Right.
It was amazing.
Well, so then I guess I'm curious too, because you were legitimately at that dinner,
yes,
following the board meeting, we were invited. You had a legitimate seat at that table.
Yes.
This was not your first job. You worked your way into this.
Correct.
It was a very high power
at the
job,
time.
right?
Yep.
At the time. What is it that you think, like if you shine curiosity onto yourself, or even right now, looking back at that, what is it that you think still stands out in terms of that feeling that you might have that you weren't living up to the same level of standard as them? Like if you were to just be curious about what that is for you, what comes up?
I care a lot about the way people receive and perceive me. And for some reason, I think coming from those entrepreneurial roots that I was going to get my security from corporate America, the title I held at that time in corporate America was great. And I don't have that title anymore, and I'm not at that table anymore. So was it a flash in the pan? Was it just a fluke that I was there? Those are the questions that I challenge myself on. And those are the things that make me wonder, will I ever get back to that table?
Would you want to?
I don't know. Maybe. But at what price? And that's my concern. I think I don't know that I'm willing to pay the price that some of them paid to get there. Right? Does that make sense?
I think time or family,
marriages, children, what I mean?
Right.
I don't know that those things are worth sacrificing to me.
So that actually reminds me of what you said about your dad, right? Where it's like he realized at some point that if he was going to work this hard, then he was going to do it for himself.
Correct.
Does that resonate for you?
I think it does more than I give it airtime for. He chose us, right? My mom chose us. My brother and I choose us kind of things. So, and now our families, right? And those are very amazing decisions. And though certain prestige, if you will, or things that I find deem success or maybe illustrate success, I would still love to say, I'm COO of JP Morgan Chase. That'd be kind of cool. But at what price? I don't think I've ever been willing to sacrifice the things that it took to become the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Could I have? Maybe. But I don't know that I ever wanted to pay that price. So I think those are the things that I'm starting to learn as I've really gone through some changes in what's important to me and the values that I place on things, and helping people, helping companies, getting in and rolling up my sleeves and being part of that fun growth, making sure that the building blocks are in place. That's really fun. And you know what? It doesn't cost me anything. I still get to see my husband every night. I still get to walk my dogs every day. I still get to be with my friends when I want to go to lunch, right? Those things are very important to me. And so I think, I do go back to the cost versus the reward, or the benefit of working hard for yourself as opposed to working hard for someone else. I think that is intrinsically somewhere in there, and I'm just starting to hear it more clearly.
Yeah. Well, and I'm even curious about, one of the things that I know about you personally is not having birthed children. And I say that intentionally, where it's not that there is not a part of you that there is a part of you that is very much maternal. And, I know it's one of those interesting things, I think, for what I've learned. And certainly I want to hear your take on this. But for women who have not birthed their own children, almost internalizing this, like what I'm supposed to be then.
Correct.
If not mom, then what?
Yep. Very, very hard. Grew up believing, and even into knew I wanted a career, but also believed my purpose in life was to have children. For whatever reason. And when I decided that reality was I wasn't going to have children, or I was done with the emotional journey that led me to bad places for not having children, you have to then realize what is my identity? Then what do I want? How do I want to be in the world where I thought I was going to be a mom? What am I going to what's going to take that place? And that's a lot, and it's hard. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. If your desire is to have a child and you don't have a child, it's a really hard thing to overcome. I don't know that you do overcome it. You learn how to deal with it, and you learn how to.
Yeah. It really truly is a fundamental, very core grief,
I'm sure. But I think, again, everyone's quilt is absolutely beautiful and fits that person. And though I will never understand that particular patch of not having children, for me, because that was something that I wanted. And I think that's the other piece of this, is that there's very little in life that I haven't set my mind to that I haven't done. And I couldn't set my mind to that and make that happen. Could we have continued to try and gone through? Yeah, probably. But it wasn't. It got to a point where I decided I was done. And so maybe that was my decision, right? And that was where my brain was like, we're done. But it's very hard. And then to reassess who to become when not, right? You said, if mom, then what? If not mom, then what? And so it's really hard. I think I've worked through it pretty well. And I have children in my life that, no, I did not birth, but they're very important to me. And I have people and friends and my family is very important, and my dogs are very important. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm involved with my dogs and any other dog that comes anywhere near me, and charities that support those dogs. And so, that's where I found I could fill that void.
Absolutely. And that's part of why I think it's so important to acknowledge and share that part of who you are, even from the perspective of, when you said your dad chose you and your family.
Yes.
And it almost sounds like it's like he chose the kids, right? He chose the marriage, he chose the kids.
Yes.
He didn't want to abandon you all by being in corporate America.
Right.
And so I'm wondering for you if it almost is like, but if I don't have the kids, then what am I leaving corporate America for?
Definitely a question.
And it sounds like you left it for you. It sounds like you left it to fulfill these dreams and these capabilities where it's almost like, to me, you create these little pseudo families with whomever you are consulting, and you fill this purpose. Like, you truly have this gift at being able to come in and with a wide angle lens and then a very narrow view lens, you see these different layers and these different dynamics that I think it really truly is a superpower. And then to be able to connect with the humans who need to make it work, you're able to recognize what people need, but it also is your gift is not in the confines of this corporate structure. And full disclosure, have never worked in corporate America, but that's what I'm hearing, I guess, is that it is almost like with restraint and expectations, and maybe the outcome is money and, status and the title, but it's not necessarily the same process that you're able to offer for yourself right now.
It's an interesting perspective, and I don't know that I've seen it that clearly until the way that you just said it. But I guess somewhere in there, I chose, deep down, I knew what mattered to me. I don't know that at the surface I knew what mattered to me, right? Because if you go and look at, any of my vision boards from earlier on, it was the nice car and the Hermes bags and the corporate titles and flying on corporate jets. And but when I look back at my life, right, and all the different patchwork pieces, the things that stand out are the friends I've made, the people I've impacted in a good way, right? Even in a bad way. But, the people whose lives are different because of me, the people that I've genuinely cared about and helped because I genuinely cared about and helped them, not for any other reason, but to genuinely care about them and help them. So I think, I don't know that I've ever recognized that, but I think it's important to recognize that I do care very deeply for people, almost to a fault sometimes, right? I care very deeply for people. And once you're my friend, you're my friend. And I will be that person for you forever. And so I take that into the workplace where I genuinely care about people and I genuinely want them to succeed. So maybe that is the price that's more important to me. To be there and help and build those relationships and have those networks of people that I genuinely care about.
That is what it sounds like is ringing true for me. And I guess the other thing too is that when you're thinking, like, how would a company know that they need you? I guess is my question, because I'm like, what a gift it is for you to be such a resource that can go into different companies and help them figure out how to essentially, drive their ship.
Right.
How do they know that they need you?
I think if they're in a position to take that next step and there's any doubt in what that next step looks like, that's where they might, let's just have a conversation. If they're thinking they need to hire people, or they're thinking that they want to try this new project, or they're thinking that they want to take on this next big client, ask yourself if you're ready. Ask yourself if that's truly, can we handle this? Can we support this? And if the answer is maybe, call me. Let's have a conversation, right? If the answer is heck no, call me. Let's have a conversation. Because I bet the answer is yes. You just have to get some pieces and parts. And I think the other way that people would know is to your point earlier. You spent a year, a very tiring, exhausting year doing what your company needed. But it's not where you thrive. It's not what you want to be doing with your time. And it's not how you best fulfill a need in the world is not writing ops procedures and manuals. So if it's a situation like that where you're missing something operationally, those are the conversations to have that I love to have, because that stuff is really exciting to me and it doesn't make me tired because it's something I love to do.
Totally. And I can tell you, even for me, rewind before I did the operations, it was irritability, resentment, thinking about selling the company or just closing doors and going back to being solo. I'm like, it's not worth it because there's so much stress and time. Yep. It's like the energy drain. Yeah. But then being able to see, okay, I actually found a mastermind before we joined ours together. That's, how we know each other. But I did one just for group practice owners. which gave that foundational support of like, you need to make sure you have these checks and balances in place in order to really thrive. So thankfully I was able to find a resource, but I think that is the key. It's like recognizing like that is not my skill set.
Right.
And to know that people like you exist in the world for small business owners. And even, I know you've worked with lots of bigger companies too, but it's like from that owner founder perspective of, it's almost like I've heard a lot of people using fractional CFOs, or, it sounds like you're almost like a fractional COO.
Yes,
that
for
they
sure.
can pull in.
I'm sure that is. Yeah, that's probably a better, more catchy title is fractional. But I don't really care, honestly, what you call me. Just call me if you need help, because I really love that that building, that relationships. It's the team building. It's the operational structures. I just think it's fun and it's really interesting. And then to see the fruits of your labor, and you can tangibly see them.
Right.
It's fun.
And it's also not just about those like KPIs or like how much money you're scaling to.
No.
It is so much more about the relationships, the culture, the process, and the experience of being in that company.
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
And having people say, I loved coming to work today. I loved coming to work yesterday. I loved coming tomorrow. I will be so excited to come tomorrow. Those are really neat things to have. And you can do that. It's possible. And to build that culture that success is something we do together is really fun. And to be part of that is really neat and a very exciting relationship to have with people.
That's so awesome. So if people want to find you and find resources from you, where should they go?
I have my website. My consulting company is Tre Cani, TRECANI Consulting.com. And you can reach out to me there. I'm on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. I always get them confused. But yes, we're on Instagram. I tried to call it Instabook the other day, and my nieces laughed at me, but it's okay. So, yeah, we're on all the social media, Tre Cani Consulting. And so for those of you that speak Italian, Tre Cani is 3 dogs. Went through a rough time in my life, went to Italy, and it was life-altering, and I came back, and I have 3 dogs, so I called it Tre Cani Consulting. So
I love that.
that's where it comes from. So that's what it is, 3 dogs consulting.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on, and thank you so much for doing what you are doing. As both a business owner and a people person, I'm so grateful. And as your friend, I'm really also so grateful that you're in my life, and I get to, I'm very proud and grateful that I get to know that I'll have you as one of the lifer friends.
Yes, I appreciate you asking me to join you today. It's been fun. It's been real. Thank you for the insights that you provide that I hadn't seen. The perspectives are always great to hear from you. I really appreciate you, the human, you, the doctor, and you, my lifelong friend.
Aw, thank you.